if I told you that being a billionaire doesn't guarantee you'll stay one? Today, we're diving into the shocking stories of 5 billionaires who went from the top of the world to losing it all. These aren't just stories about money. They're cautionary tales about hubris, bad decisions, and how quickly everything can crumble. Let's get into it. Story 1. Alan Stanford. Our first billionaire is Alan Stanford, a man who built a financial empire that turned out to be built on lies. Stanford was once worth over $2 billion and lived like royalty in the Caribbean. He owned banks, cricket teams, and even had his own private island. But here's the twist, it was all a massive fraud. Stanford was running a Ponzi scheme, promising investors incredible returns that didn't exist. He was using new investors' money to pay old investors, a classic pyramid scheme. When the scheme collapsed in 2009, over $7 billion vanished into thin air. Stanford was arrested, convicted, and sentenced to 110 years in prison. Today, he sits in a Florida prison with nothing to his name. From billionaire to inmate, a spectacular fall from grace. What makes Stanford's case particularly tragic is the thousands of victims he left behind. Many were everyday people who trusted him with their life savings, their retirement funds, their children's college education money. Some victims lost everything they had worked their entire lives to build. Stanford showed no remorse during his trial, maintaining his innocence despite overwhelming evidence. His lavish lifestyle of private jets, mansions, and exclusive parties came at the expense of hardworking people who believed in him. Story 2. Elizabeth Holmes. Next up is Elizabeth Holmes, the former golden child of Silicon Valley. At just 19, she dropped out of Stanford to start Theranos, a health tech company that promised to revolutionize blood testing. By age 31, she was worth $4.5 billion on paper and was being compared to Steve Jobs. The problem? The technology didn't work. Theranos claimed their machines could run hundreds of tests from a single drop of blood, but it was all smoke and mirrors. When investigative journalists exposed the truth, everything unraveled. Holmes was convicted of fraud in 2022 and is currently serving an 11-year prison sentence. Her net worth? Zero. Her company? Dissolved. She went from the cover of Forbes to federal prison, proving that you can't fake innovation forever. What's fascinating about Holmes is how she cultivated an image of being the next Steve Jobs. She wore black turtlenecks, adopted a deep voice, and spoke about changing the world. She had powerful people fooled. The media loved her story of a young female entrepreneur disrupting healthcare, but behind the carefully crafted image was a company using traditional blood testing machines and manipulating results. Story 3. Bernie Madoff. No list of fallen billionaires would be complete without Bernie Madoff, the man behind the largest Ponzi scheme in history. Madoff was a Wall Street legend, a former chairman of NASDAQ, and someone investors trusted completely. At his peak, he managed billions and lived in absolute luxury. But for decades, Madoff wasn't investing anyone's money, he was stealing it. His Ponzi scheme defrauded investors of approximately $65 billion. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, he couldn't keep up the charade anymore, and the whole thing collapsed. Madoff was sentenced to 150 years in prison and died behind bars in 2021. He lost everything: his wealth, his reputation, his family relationships. Even his sons turned against him. One of them tragically took his own life. Madoff's legacy is one of betrayal and destruction. The human cost of Madoff's crimes extends far beyond just money. Charities were wiped out. Retirees who thought they had secure futures found themselves with nothing. Families were torn apart by the revelation that their patriarch was a criminal. Madoff's own family paid a devastating price. His son, Mark, took his own life exactly 2 years after his father's arrest, unable to live with the shame and pain. His wife, Ruth, was left ostracized by society, forced to give up nearly everything she owned. Madoff spent his final years in prison, reportedly showing some remorse, but the damage was irreversible. Thousands of lives were destroyed by his greed. What's particularly chilling about Madoff's scheme is how long it lasted and how he targeted his own community. He specifically sought out Jewish charities and organizations, using his reputation within the community to build trust. Story 4. Sean Quinn. Let's head to Ireland to talk about Sean Quinn, once the richest man in the country. Quinn built his fortune from nothing, starting with a small gravel business and eventually creating a massive empire in insurance, real estate, and manufacturing. At his peak, he was worth $6 billion. His downfall came from a disastrous bet on a bank. Quinn secretly accumulated a massive stake in Anglo-Irish Bank through risky financial instruments. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, the bank collapsed, and Quinn lost everything overnight. He was declared bankrupt in 2012, became embroiled in legal battles, and even spent time in jail for contempt of court. From Ireland's richest man to bankruptcy, Quinn's story shows how one bad investment can destroy an entire empire. Story 5. Eike Batista. Finally, we have Eike Batista from Brazil, a man who embodied the phrase, "the bigger they are, the harder they fall." In 2012, Batista was worth $35 billion, making him the 7th richest person in the world. He was flashy, confident, and constantly in the media, predicting he'd become the world's richest man. Batista's empire was built on oil, mining, and energy companies, but most of them were based on overly optimistic projections. When his companies failed to deliver, investors fled. His flagship oil company found far less oil than promised, and the entire empire collapsed like a house of cards. By 2013, just 1 year later, Batista had lost over $34 billion, the largest destruction of wealth in history. He faced corruption charges, was arrested, and while some convictions were later overturned, his reputation and fortune were permanently destroyed. He went from billions to owing money. Batista's personality was as big as his fortune and his downfall. He was known for driving gold-plated Mercedes, dating supermodels, and making outrageous predictions about his future wealth. He named all his companies with the letter X, OGX for oil, MMX for mining, LLX for logistics, claiming the X represented multiplication of wealth. He sold his story brilliantly, convincing investors that Brazil's natural resources would make him the richest man alive. But the reality didn't match the hype. His oil company, OGX, was supposed to be sitting on massive reserves, but when they actually drilled, they found far less oil than projected. Production targets were missed by huge margins. His other companies faced similar problems. Big promises, poor execution. As the stock prices plummeted, Batista's net worth evaporated at an unprecedented rate. He went from being worth $35 billion to negative net worth in just 18 months. So there you have it, 5 billionaires who lost everything. What can we learn from these stories? First, fraud and lies might work temporarily, but they always catch up with you. Second, overconfidence and risky bets can destroy even the largest fortunes. And third, wealth without integrity is just a house of cards waiting to collapse. These cautionary tales remind us that no amount of money makes you invincible. Whether through greed, deception, or simply bad decisions, these billionaires prove that the fall from the top can be swift and brutal. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe for more fascinating stories about wealth, power, and downfall. Drop a comment below telling me which story shocked you the most, or if you know of other billionaires who lost everything that we should cover in a future video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.